Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1002 Social Media Innovation. And this is a short overview video which will give you an idea of what we'll be covering in the sixth lecture. And this is a new lecture in this series which is about, I'm going to approach this on the basis of some underpinning ideas. So far we've looked at examples. We've looked at examples about how we live in a mediated world in which representations and ideas are expressed through different forms of media, and they give us a new way to engage with the world, to think about with the world, and to form communities, which is something we'll look at in more detail next week. But I wanted to talk about some of the, if you like, some of the underlying principles that I look to and use when I'm thinking about how we work with media, and certainly with social media, because one of the expectations that we have about social media is that sometimes we regard it as being the same as traditional forms of media, that we broadcast, that we transmit, that there's a signal, and that we exchange information in a way which is like a transaction. And what I want to do in this lecture is propose an alternative view of media engagement, which is much more active than the kind of traditional producer-audience passive relationship, but is actually based on, I mean, I heard the expression the other day that media is like holding a mirror up to the world, to people. Actually, there is no mirror. You know, we should be looking at each other and engaging with each other, and that's the difference. That's one of the differences that social media makes, is that we're no longer predisposed to simply look at a screen and regard that screen as a reflection back to us, but actually we see through, and we have to look for the other people, the people who are engaged in producing that media and communicating. So there's some concept ideas in this which I'll run through, which are based on the ideas of a theorist, a sociologist, Herbert Blumer, who related the idea of what's called symbolic interactionism. And the idea is that you negotiate, and that you form a view of your next line of action, or the things that you want to do, that you want to accomplish in your social situation. But you do that through a process of shared negotiation. So in order for me to progress forward, I have to negotiate with other people, and for other people to move forward, they have to negotiate with me as well. And this is an ongoing process. It's kind of, we do it through gestures, we do it through language, we do it through engagement with each other, we do it through our media. So it's the idea that we are participants, we are players, we are participants in this process. And that what we're looking at is the, if you like, the kind of the contours of the social world. The kind of social, and I'm going to use an example. I'm not going to explain what that example is here, because I think it's really important that you get this example fresh, if you like, at the lecture. Although if you read the lecture notes, which are posted up on the wiki, you'll get them anyway. But it's the idea that we can combine a sense of the social arrangements that we are we inhabit, that we're part of, and the meanings that we engage with. And the idea is, fundamentally, the idea is that if you change one, you change the other. So if you change the meanings and the terms and the language and the expressions and the symbolic representations that media give us and enable us to use to mediate the world to one another, then we change the social relationships and the social settings as well. If we change the social settings, we also change the meanings. The two are related, they're relational. And this idea is kind of, it's written in something that Herbert Blumer talks about, in terms of you change one, you change the other. And it kind of struck me, it's very much like Einstein's theory of relativity, in that time and space are one and the same thing, space-time. And that if you change geometry, space, you change time as well. And so the two are related. What we have to look to, though, is the factor that changes that brings about those changes, and that's in Einstein's case, it's mass. So the more massive an object is, the more it curves and warps space-time, which means that time changes and dilates, and geometry changes and dilates very, very imperceptibly, but it changes. We live in a world of, if you like, human behaviours and what we call intersubjectivity, whereby we are using our all the time. Our social process is one of trying to make sense of each other. And a lot of the time we maybe fail at doing that, and we can't understand why things are happening, and we can't move on, and we can't, get on with things, if you like, until we kind of start to lay out some of the, as I say, the contours that demonstrates how the world of social meaning, if you like, the universe of social meaning is structured. So to do that, we need to think about the things that humans do. We have to think about what human experience is, and we have to think about the kind of what Bloomer calls the lines of action that people take when they enter into a social world. So what are the contours? So this is a fairly kind of I'm going to try and express this through the use of some memes, which might sound kind of faintly ridiculous, and I suppose it is. Memes are, but they tell us something. Memes tell us something about things that are going on within our culture, within our social arrangements, within the terms and the language and the mediated concepts that we use. They tell us something about what it is to be a human being in the early 21st century, at the start of perhaps an industrial, a conceptual revolution, a way that of something that is changing our view of the world. And as these new social media forms come into play, we see changes and we see social forms emerge. So in the 1960s, when cinema was a popular form, and then pop music comes along, and you saw that combination with art that we looked at with Andy Warhol and the Velvet Underground. In the 70s, it was kind of popular music, popular culture, popular cinema, pop art, and rock music with Roxy Music. In the 80s, it was through Talking Heads with television, and in the 90s, it was kind of digital sampling technology. These are the contours. These are the way that social meaning are adapted and changed. So anyway, I'll try my best to explain this concept and this idea, and look at some examples of how maybe we can think about how we use social media, and what the reasons for us to use social media are, and what the forms of social media are in their present shape. And that can hopefully give us an opportunity to kind of have some fun with changing and adapting forms of social media. Anyway, the notes are up on the wiki, and the wiki is at wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk, and I'll see you at the lecture on Tuesday.